They have been trying to join EU for years. Islamophobia in EU doesn't mean Turkey. It means other Islam countries that don't assimilate as good as Turkey. Geri zekalı benim Amerikalı olduğumu zannediyor biliyor musun? Salak herif. İnanamıyorum yani. Bana geldi diyor ki sen Avrupalı değilsin anlamıyorsun dedi. Ama unuttu Türk olduğumu bilmiyor herhalde geri zekalı. İsmim Hasan abi lan. Ne diyorsun oğlum?
So in this video, we're going to take a look at how Turkey's Ukraine posture has changed, and what might have motivated this sudden shift. Never miss an episode, and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. So let's start with a bit of context, and explain how Turkey has positioned itself throughout the Ukraine war. True to form, Turkish President Recep Erdogan has tried to play both sides. And, well, he's sort of succeeded.
Oh, he has succeeded. Recep Tayyip Erdogan always plays both sides. And as a consequence of playing both sides, he always comes out on top.
For starters, Turkey has enjoyed a series of diplomatic wins since the invasion. Erdogan has pretty good relations with Putin, despite Turkey being a NATO member, and Turkey hosted the first round of negotiations between Ukraine and Russia in March 2022. While these negotiations promptly collapsed, Erdogan then played a key role in negotiating the Black Sea grain deal in July 2022, which allowed Ukrainian farmers to export their grain via the Turkish Straits, with monitoring from the Turkish authorities. As well as burnishing Turkey's diplomatic credentials, Erdogan's ambivalence also has helped the Turkish economy. Turkey's economy looked pretty vulnerable when the war began. Thanks to Erdogan's unorthodox monetary policy, inflation was already running at about 50% year-on-year in January 2022, and the sanctions-induced rise in global energy prices threatened to make everything a whole lot worse. However, Turkey weathered the storm pretty well. Turkey refused to join with most sanctions, which meant that they were able to both import Russian energy and act as a transit hub for Russian oil and gas. Lots of Russian cash also flowed into Turkey to avoid sanctions, which provided Turkey with a much-needed source of foreign currency, while Turkish defense companies made serious money selling drones and infantry carriers to Ukraine. In 2023, Turkey refused to immediately let Sweden and Finland into NATO, which both pleased the Kremlin and allowed Turkey to extract various concessions from other NATO members. Then, just last year, Turkey again stepped in as a mediator to negotiate a prisoner swap, which included
We are the table, baby. We are the table.
American journalist Evan Gershkovich. You get the idea then. Turkey has played both sides, continuing to trade with both Russia and Ukraine, while using its unique position as a relatively Russia-friendly NATO member to position itself as a much-needed mediator. However, in the past couple of weeks, Turkey has started sounding conspicuously pro-Ukraine. This really began on Tuesday last week, when, just a few hours after Russian and American officials met in Saudi Arabia, Zelensky paid a surprise visit to Ankara. At the joint press conference afterwards, Erdogan insisted that Ukraine and Europe should be included in the negotiations, reaffirmed his support for Ukraine's territorial integrity as, quote, non-negotiable, essentially implying that he expected Ukraine to retake all of its pre-2014 territory, including Crimea, and even came out in support of Ukraine's NATO membership. This all directly contradicted the Trump administration, who had pursued negotiations without Ukraine or Europe, suggested that Ukraine will have to accept some territorial losses, and dismissed Ukraine's NATO aspirations as unrealistic. This was followed by similar comments from the Turkish foreign minister, who this week reaffirmed Turkey's support for Ukrainian NATO membership, suggested that Turkey could act as a security guarantor in the event of a ceasefire, and encouraged Europe to pivot away from the US, arguing that reducing dependency on the US will make them more resilient. Now, it's important not to overstate.
Okay, the real reason why I said Turkey could play this role is because America has often in the Middle East used Turkey as the middleman in many affairs that they do not want to be seen directly involved in, whether it be Syria or even ISIS. That is Turkey's major role. This way, Turkey gets to, this way America gets to save face and say, oh, we're not doing this ourselves. And then, use Turkey to be the middleman, the envoy, a country that already has the precedent of violating pre-existing NATO contracts and NATO security. I don't think Donald sees Turkey as a country. No, he does. I mean, it's not him. It's people in his corner.
State all of this. Turkey has always supported Ukraine's territorial integrity, and Erdogan has a bit of a habit of flip-flopping on foreign policy. Nonetheless, it's at least true that Turkey sounds a lot more pro-Ukraine all of a sudden. And, well, this is good news for Zelensky. So, what's motivated this shift? Well, as we see it, there are at least 4 possible reasons. Firstly, Erdogan has made it clear that he still wants to mediate, and is probably trying to keep Ukraine on side by convincing Kyiv that they won't force an unfavourable deal on them like the one that Trump is apparently trying to negotiate with Russia. Second, it's part of a wider turn in international opinion against Russia and the US. This became glaringly apparent in Monday's UN General Assembly vote, where just a handful of countries voted with the US and Russia against the European resolution calling for an end to the war in Ukraine. This is essentially because, while the war looked a bit like a NATO-Russia proxy war before, which meant that countries which weren't super keen on the West were reluctant to throw their weight behind Ukraine, now Trump and Russia are apparently on the same side. It looks more like plain old neo-imperialism, the big countries bullying the small countries. Erdogan has long advocated for a multipolar world, rather than one dominated by the traditional superpowers, so it's not surprising that he's resisting Trump here. Third, Turkey wants Russia out of the Black Sea, which is why Erdogan is so keen on Ukraine recovering all of its pre-2014 territory, including Crimea.
Erdogan resisting any American leadership is perhaps one of the funniest things I've ever heard. Immediately, as a Turkish person, I laugh. Okay? Like, you can't say this right after Erdogan basically destroyed the Assad regime and undermined the pre-existing goodwill that they had with NATO, or goodwill that they had with Russia.
Crimea. But fourth, Turkey wants to leverage its military power to get something out of the EU. For context, Turkey is one of the largest armies in NATO, with more active troops than any European army. Erdogan has noticed that Europe needs a military power to guarantee Ukraine's security without American support.
This part is correct.
And he's offering to help if the EU gives him something in return, like letting Turkey join the EU. Erdogan actually made this explicit on Monday, when he claimed that Turkey's accession into the EU is the only way to solve the continent's security and demographic crises. This isn't the first time that Erdogan has tried to play this either, literally hours after Trump won the US election.
Europeans are so insanely Islamophobic. There is 0%. This would collapse the EU. Okay, this has been a meta and a meme, I would say, in my opinion, for decades. My entire lifetime, EU membership for Turkey has been floated in front of Turkey in a way that is not dissimilar to Ukraine, as a matter of fact. Except, of course, Ukraine being Christian does have a likelihood. This is just not going to happen.
In November, Erdogan told reporters at the European political community that, quote, Turkey's full inclusion in the European Union defence efforts is indispensable for Europe's peace and security. Now, while it's hard to imagine Turkey actually joining the EU anytime soon, Erdogan might still be able to negotiate something like a closer economic relationship with Europe, or at least get the Europeans to turn a blind eye to his ongoing crackdown on opposition politicians. This also creates a bit of a dilemma for Europe. If Europe does actually decide to build a new security architecture outside of NATO, and we're saying Europe, not the EU here, because it will probably include the UK too, would this include Turkey? On one hand, Turkey has a strong army, a thriving defence industry, and sits at a strategically valuable position along the Black Sea and at the confluence of Europe and the Middle East. On the other hand, Erdogan has proven a somewhat unreliable and occasionally two-faced NATO ally, and
clearly you are not European. You don't know what Turkey people want. They have been trying to join EU for years. Islamophobia in EU doesn't mean Turkey. It means other Islam countries that don't assimilate as good as Turkey. Gerizekalı benim Amerikalı olduğumu zannediyor, biliyor musun? Salak herif. İnanamıyorum yani. Bana geldi diyor ki sen Avrupalı değilsin anlamıyorsun dedi. Ama unuttu, Türk olduğumu bilmiyor herhalde gerizekalı. İsmim Hasan abi lan. Ne diyorsun oğlum? This has to be one of the dumbest Turks I've ever encountered in my chat. Or even funnier, he's some weird Turkish exceptionalist who also is still very much Islamophobic.
Certain European countries, most notably France and Greece, could be very resistant to the idea. Now, the thing is, often in politics, we need to understand a wide variety of topics to truly grasp what's going on. And fortunately, our sponsor this week, Brilliant, can help us do just that, with thousands of lessons in maths, science, programming, and AI. And not only that, their interactive lessons teach you by...
Also, I what was I gonna say? God damn it.